In the vast, disciplined world of ancient Rome and empire built on laws, armies, and centuries of tradition, there existed rituals so ancient and mysterious that later generations tried to quietly erase them from memory. Among these forgotten customs, one stood out for its raw emotional intensity and its deep symbolic meaning. A wedding night ritual designed to separate a new bride from her former household and spiritually introduce her into her husband's family. To understand why this practice even existed, we have to step deep into early Roman beliefs. This was a world where unseen forces, ancestral spirits, omens, and household gods shaped every single step of life. Marriage in Rome wasn't just a romantic union. It was a serious alliance between families, carrying a spiritual and cultural weight that went far beyond the two individuals. To the early Romans, a young woman belonged not only to her family but also to the protective spirits of her father's home, known as the Lares. These spirits guarded the very threshold of the house and were believed to influence everything from prosperity to safety. So when a bride left her childhood home, she wasn't merely moving out. She was crossing into the spiritual territory of another lineage, another set of ancestors. The Romans feared that if this transition wasn't properly marked, the bride might remain symbolically tied to her old household. This could create disharmony between the ancestral spirits of the two families, disrupting the cosmic balance. This wasn't a small concern. For the Romans, this was a matter of spiritual order. So, a ritual emerged dramatic, emotional, and profoundly symbolic to ensure the bride fully entered her new life. The transformation began long before the wedding ceremony itself. The bride's hair was styled in an ancient pattern called the senicrines. Her hair was carefully parted into 6 braids, not with a comb, but with the point of a spear. Now, while that sounds severe to our modern ears, for the early Romans, the spear was a sacred symbol. It represented protection, the guardianship of the household, and the serious responsibilities that came with marriage. Some believed the spear connected the bride to Rome's earliest, most martial traditions where communities were protected by the vigilance of their warriors. Others saw it as a symbolic cutting away of childhood ties, clearing the path for her new role as a wife and mother. As evening fell, the wedding procession began. Imagine a vibrant, noisy scene, lit by the flickering glow of torches and filled with the sound of chanting and singing. The bride herself was a vision, wearing the flammeum, a distinctive flame-colored veil. This fiery color wasn't just for show. It was a symbol of Hymen, the god of marriage, and represented light, transformation, and a new beginning. The Romans believed that transitional moments like moving from one home to another attracted spiritual attention, both good and bad. So the singing and the bright torches weren't just for celebration. They were a form of spiritual protection, meant to ward off any negative influences or malevolent spirits that might be lurking in the shadows. As the procession reached the groom's home, one of the most famous customs took place. The bride was traditionally lifted over the threshold. While later cultures have romanticized this gesture as a sweet, chivalrous act in ancient Rome, it held a much more solemn, practical meaning. The threshold was a sacred boundary, guarded by its own deity. If the bride tripped while entering, it would be a terrible omen for the marriage. By lifting her over, the Romans ensured she crossed into the household without hesitation or any sign of a bad omen. Her first step into her new life had to be symbolically perfect. But it was inside the home that the emotional heart of the ritual took place. The sources we have from Rome's earliest days, which are fragmented, and were often softened or rewritten by later, more civilized writers describe a symbolic transfer of the bride from her attendants to her new husband. This was not an act of literal force or anything harmful. Instead, it was a ceremonial reenactment of one of Rome's most important founding myths, the story of the Sabine women. In the earliest form of this ritual, it symbolized the idea that the bride was being entrusted to a new family, not eagerly running toward it. This reflected core Roman values of modesty, dignity, and female virtue. The bride's attendants would often express a kind of ritualized sorrow, not because any harm was occurring, but because they were witnessing the profound emotional break between the bride and her entire childhood world. This symbolic transfer was immediately followed by a powerful, transformative moment, the presentation of the house keys to the bride. This gesture was packed with meaning. It represented responsibility, trust, and her new authority over the household's daily affairs. Far from being a passive figure, a Roman wife or matrona held significant duties. She was expected to oversee the domestic management, sustain the family traditions, and ensure harmony within the home. Those keys were a physical reminder of the new identity she now carried and the central role she was expected to play in her new family. The ceremony's final elements were focused on solidifying this new union. There were blessings, prayers, and recitations, all aimed at ensuring unity, stability, and prosperity for the new couple. The household gods of the groom's family were formally asked to welcome the bride into their protection, just as her former household guardians were symbolically honored and released from their duty to her. Every single step was designed to maintain spiritual order during this major life transition. But over the centuries, Rome evolved. As the empire grew more cosmopolitan and absorbed influences from Greece and other cultures, these older, more rustic rituals started to seem outdated. The Roman elites began to prefer more refined, elegant ceremonies that aligned with their sophisticated vision of civilization. Many of these ancient customs, including this emotionally intense wedding night ritual, were gradually softened, simplified, or just quietly abandoned altogether. Historians suggest that later generations of Romans may have even felt a little embarrassed by these older traditions. They revealed a more primitive, superstitious origin that didn't quite fit with the image of a grand logical empire built on law and reason. And so the ritual disappeared from everyday practice. It was preserved only in a few rare writings by scholars and antiquarians who were obsessed with collecting these fading fragments of ancient customs. Still, the symbolism survived in echoes. The fiery veil, the lifting over the threshold, the formal blessings, the ceremonial knots and gestures, all of these elements, even in their softened forms, carried the memory of a world where transitions were sacred and rituals were believed to hold real, tangible power. Understanding this ancient ritual today reveals so much about Roman society. It shows us the deep importance they placed on ancestral spirits, the seriousness of household unity, and the way symbolic acts were used to shape and define a person's identity. It also reminds us that civilizations, even the greatest ones, tend to preserve only the parts of their past that match their ideal self-image. Rome, despite its incredible achievements in law, engineering, and architecture, quietly set aside the older Messier traditions that no longer aligned with its evolving culture. Yet the fragments remain like threads of ancient history. They allow us to piece together a picture of a Roman bride, veiled in flame-colored cloth, stepping across a sacred threshold. She was symbolically leaving behind the entire world she had ever known, and entering a new life, bound by tradition, ceremony, and the immense weight of Rome's timeless identity. Thanks for watching. If you found this glimpse into ancient Rome fascinating, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories from the past. See you next time.